Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. It is championship time in fantasy leagues. We got to nail these start-sit calls. So in this video, I'm going to give you my top starts of the week for week 17 of the 2023 fantasy football season. Please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. And with that being said, let's get right into the video and take home some titles. We're going to start at the quarterback position, where I'm going to talk about Brock Purdy, QB of the San Francisco 49ers. He's been really great for fantasy all year, a little bit underrated to start the year, but he's proven over the season that he is legit and very good for fantasy as well as real life football. Whether you want to say it's because of his weapons or because of how good he actually is, it doesn't matter. He had been putting up big numbers. At one point, he was the MVP favorite, but we saw last week against the Baltimore Ravens put up a big stinker. Terrible game. 4 interceptions, single-digit fantasy points. According to Fantasy Pro scoring, he was the quarterback 33 on the week. And I don't know if you guys know this at home, but there are only 32 teams in the NFL. So just shockingly bad. Some of those interceptions were tips. Others were just, bad throws. It just, nothing went right. And actually, he did also leave that game early. Darnold came in. I believe he got a little banged up. I don't know. It didn't seem serious, but they just didn't put him back in there. And Darnold ended up throwing a garbage time touchdown. But I digress. Important to note about that game is that was a brutal matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. I expected more out of Brock Purdy than what we saw, obviously. But I often make Brock Purdy a start of the week in a good matchup because I feel like he's one of those guys that I can still get away with relying on as a start of the week, and it's not too obvious of a call. But against Baltimore, I did not do that because that was a tough matchup. Week 17. He gets a much better matchup against the Washington Commanders. They are one of the best matchups in all of football for fantasy quarterbacks. This should be a big bounce back spot here. Coming off of a loss, and an ugly loss at that, I expect them to keep the pedal down, keep the gas pushed down, and try to have a little bit better performance here, and they should be able to do whatever they want against the Washington Commanders. Every team has bad games. We even saw the 49ers at one point this year. They had a rough stretch. They bounced back, looked like Super Bowl favorites, had one bad game. I'm not going to go away from him this week. I like him as a mid-quarterback 1 in an amazing matchup, and he should be winning people plenty of championships this week. All right, so I don't make these videos to tell you to start guys like Jalen Hurts against the Arizona Cardinals. Like, obviously, if you have Hurts, you're starting him every week, especially in a matchup like that. But I'm trying to give you some options that you can kind of turn to if you need, if you had some injuries at the position or you need like a streaming option, someone like that. So Derek Carr, listen, he's not the safest play just because we've seen him up and down so much this year and look pretty bad at times. But if you need help at quarterback, I think Derek Carr is someone you can definitely turn to. He has put up over 20 points the last couple of weeks, according to Fantasy Pro scoring. Was the quarterback 7-3 the last 2 weeks. His weapons are back healthy. He's got a healthy receiving core with Olave and Shaheed. I guess Michael Thomas is probably not going to play, last I heard. But he still has Alvin Kamara. And it's a great matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They get exposed in the passing game. So again, this is not someone that I'm forcing into my lineup, but maybe if you were like relying on Russell Wilson and he got benched for the year, or you decided not to play Joe Flacco on Thursday night, like me, Derek Carr is a good pivot option. So someone you can play as a nice streamer in a good matchup who has been playing well lately, and might get you through to a championship this week. We're going to move on to the running back position, where I want to start with DeAndre Swift, running back of the Philadelphia Eagles. He has been really great for fantasy overall. He's had his, games where he hasn't been amazing, but at his ADP, I wanted nothing to do with him during draft season, but when it's all said and done, he was worth his draft position, and he has had a lot of usable games for fantasy. His biggest problem, obviously, as you guys know, is when he gets tackled at the 1-yard line, Jalen Hurts next play does the tush push, and Swift does not get a touchdown. He's not involved in the goal line carries because they're just gonna do the quarterback sneak tush push with Hurts. But even with that being said, I think this might be a week where we see DeAndre Swift actually punch one in before getting tackled at the 1-yard line and setting up that touchdown for Hurts. The Cardinals, their opponent, great matchup for really offenses in general, but teams are able to find a lot of success on the ground against them. I think he's going to see a ton of volume. He's coming off 20 carries and a touchdown last week. No targets, which is a little surprising, but it doesn't really matter because he was very involved in the passing or in the rushing game. So I think this is more of a ground game for DeAndre Swift, but however he gets it done, I think he's going to get it done. He's a running back 1 play with more upside than we might give him credit for if he's able to get those touchdowns. So just if he gets that extra inch at the goal line before going down, he'll be a good play. But even if not, I think just on yardage alone, he will be a very good play for fantasy. So fire him up as a running back 1 in week 17 at home against the Arizona Cardinals. And then in that same game, I'm going to make the other running back across the field, James Conner, running back of the Arizona Cardinals, a start of the week. So it's hard for me to talk about because, probably a few years ago now in Dynasty, I traded James Conner away for James Robinson, and I think there was like a 3rd round pick involved in there. And I was happy to get rid of Conner. He struck me as someone who at age 28 wouldn't really be in the league doing what he's doing anymore, but he's proven me wrong. And once again, he's just getting it done for fantasy when he's on the field, especially the last few weeks. So before the bye week, running back 5.5 PPR, 22.5 points. Then after the bye, 16.4 and 19.7 points. The running back 11 and 5. In tough matchups against the 49ers and the Bears, now he's taken on the Philadelphia Eagles, where season long, that is a very tough matchup for running backs. But if you look at how the Eagles defense has been playing lately, they're actually giving it up on the ground to the running back position. They've kind of turned into a softer matchup against the running game. So Conner has already been a running back 1 the last 3 weeks in some tougher matchups. So I think just based on volume and how he's been utilized and how much the Cardinals are going to need him, you should be playing him regardless. But I also wanted to make him a start of the week just to let you guys know that, like, hey, on your fantasy app, it's going to say like the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's going to be a red number, and it's going to say, oh, this is like one of the worst matchups in fantasy. But if you take a look at more recent data and how the Eagles have been playing, this matchup is actually a lot better than it appears. So I just wanted to talk about James Conner as maybe you're making a start-sit decision, and you might want to consider James Conner maybe a little bit more than you are just based strictly on those season-long matchup numbers. Because I know you can see the red number and get a little scared away. Maybe in DraftKings as well, or daily lineups, it's going to say like, oh, it's not a good matchup. But you could put him in there, and he's been good for fantasy and good for the Cardinals. So I'm firing him up as a running back 2, very safe play. He sees work on the ground and in the air. He should succeed for fantasy, and at the very least be a good play, a solid play. But we'll see how the game goes and if he's able to get in the end zone and put up a big game. My next running back start of the week is going to be Chuba Hubbard, running back of the Carolina Panthers. Not a must start, but someone who I think is a solid play this week based on volume and the matchup. Obviously, the Panthers signed Miles Sanders in the offseason. That has not worked out, much to my chagrin as someone who has him in Dynasty and did not sell high when he had that hype. But it's been the Chuba Hubbard show lately. Since week 12, it looks like he's been in double digits every week in half PPR. He has a pretty solid floor, obviously, and we've seen a couple times, 17 over 20 points. So against the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's a matchup where I think he can exploit, especially with Trevor Lawrence. Is Trevor Lawrence? I've been on a vacation lately, so I've been a little out of the loop. He's been ruled out. Okay, so that's what I thought I heard last. Trevor Lawrence is out. That means Jacksonville might not be as explosive on offense, might not be a situation where they're blowing out the Panthers. Granted, the Panthers are arguably the worst team in the league. But game script could be a little closer where the Panthers can run the ball against Jacksonville, so that does work in Chuba's favor. With that being said, though, the Panthers did just come off a game where they barely lost to the Packers, put up 30 points. So regardless, there's a lot of moving parts here. Just the Panthers offense in general hasn't been great. But all we know is that Chuba Hubbard has taken over as the lead back. He's had, 20 plus carries multiple times recently, 16 carries last week. Even if he's not the most efficient, he's seeing a ton of volume. He is a decent bet for a touchdown on any given week. Looks like he sees, a handful of receptions here and there. So you can do a lot worse than starting Chuba Hubbard. Not a must start, but a solid running back to play. There's been a lot of moving parts this week and this season in general with so many injuries, I feel like, and just a lot of offenses underperforming. So Chuba Hubbard is someone where I picked him up earlier in the year this season. And, just with how things are going, I'm in a third place game after barely losing the championship. Dang it. And I'm probably going to be starting Chuba Hubbard, and I'm actually pretty confident with that. So you can fire him up with pretty decent confidence as a running back too against the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 17. And speaking of moving parts, I record these videos, obviously, before game time. I'm actually doing this one a little later in the week on Saturday, December 30th. There is a game tonight starting soon. We got the Sunday game starting in tomorrow, obviously, but monitor the news to see what's happening with things that I say in this video, because things do change rapidly. And one thing to monitor is the Raiders backfield. Josh Jacobs, their lead bell cow back. Last I heard, he's doubtful as of this recording. And Zamir White, since filling in, has been great for fantasy. I was skeptical that he was going to step in and be, viable for fantasy, but he has been amazing. I wish I had picked him up in a couple of leagues where I had a chance to. He's seeing a ton of volume, 17 and 22 carries the last couple of weeks. Only 1 target last week for no catches, but the week before, 4 targets turned into 3 receptions, only 16 yards. But especially in PPR leagues, even getting a handful of targets does help. And the Raiders in general, they're playing well, and on defense, they're keeping the games competitive, whereas that was not the case for the Raiders at one point. So the game script, along with Zamir White just getting all the volume and being good with it, has kind of turned Zamir White into someone that I want to play this week in a good matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. The last couple of weeks, he's had 16 and 14.5 points, the running back 12 and 15.5 PPR. So I see no reason not to fire him up again. If you made it to the championship and you have an absolutely stacked roster where you just can't afford to bench some of these household names, like, I get it. But if you can, I would try to fit Zamir White into your lineup, because he's going to be the lead back if Jacobs is out, which he is doubtful to play, as I said. And it's a good matchup, and he's been great for fantasy lately, seeing a ton of volume. I feel like you just got to try to at least get him in there. I like him as a running back to play this week, assuming he's by himself. And yeah, I think he's going to be one of those names that you can look back and be like, wow, what a random time that was when Zamir White won people championships. All right, and I just quickly want to talk about Zach Charbonnet, running back of the Seattle Seahawks. Please pay attention. He is not a start of the week unless Ken Walker is out, okay? I make these videos to kind of highlight some under-the-radar people, but also talk about injuries so that you guys are aware. So Kenneth Walker, I believe he was dealing with an injury as well as an illness. So last I heard, game time decision. Ken Walker is the clear lead back, so if Walker is active, I'm staying away from Charbonnet. But if Walker is out and Charbonnet is the lead back, he's still not a must-start player. But we've seen with Ken Walker out, when he's out, Charbonnet is the guy. It didn't turn into crazy production for fantasy. He had a good game against Dallas, was the running back 11 with 19 carries. But other than that, hasn't been an electric year in general for Charbonnet. But I just want to bring him up as someone who can volume his way to some solid production. So I'm in a league where up until Sunday, I'm going to be making changes, monitoring the news with like injuries and all sorts of stuff. So Charbonnet is someone who might be an auto start for me if Walker is out, or there might be no chance I'm playing him at all if Walker is in. So I just wanted to talk about him quickly, make you aware that it is worth monitoring. It's a later game, so you might not know until 4:05 Eastern time what the status is, which is unfortunate, but just someone to keep on your radar, have a pivot option, and just good luck dealing with everything that's going on this week with all these injuries and illnesses and everything. We're moving on to wide receiver, where my first start of the week is Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. I made Derek Carr, his QB, a start of the week. I'm stacking him with Chris Olave. He's had his moments this year, up and down, been injured at times. But you know what? I think he's a talented player. Coming off, since the bye week, he's been in double digits and half PPR every single week. Coming off an 18.8 point game, the wide receiver 12 in half PPR. He's someone where, based on this season, it hasn't gone according to plan, obviously, but someone who's talented enough where you're probably starting him no matter what, especially in this matchup. It's a great matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They give up production through the air. Chris Olave should be able to feast in this matchup. He should see a ton of targets. I think that he is a wide receiver 1 play, and Olave is one of those rare players that has huge upside. We haven't seen it a ton this year. Not quite any 20-point games, a couple 18s in there in half PPR, but someone that you pretty much got to throw out there. And I think he's a really good bet to help carry you to a title and really make a difference in your lineup if he hits on a big play or two. All right, now we're going to talk about the San Francisco 49ers, okay? So obviously, like I said, I don't make these videos to be too obvious. Christian McCaffrey, he could be a championship winner for everyone that has him against Washington. But I already made Brock Purdy a start of the week at quarterback. I like his weapons in this game. Deebo, Aiyuk, as well as George Kittle, who we'll talk about later at tight end. But I'm a little this is a touchy subject for me. Okay, so in one league, I barely made it to the championship game because of CMC. I had him, won by like a point or two, and then simultaneously in another league, I lost against McCaffrey while I had Deebo Samuel in that same game, and I lost by like 2 or 3 points. It was a half PPR. I needed Deebo just to do a little bit more, but he had 12 targets. It only turned into 4 for 47, only 2 for 7 on the ground. Just a very disappointing game. If he did what he does each and every week, I would have made it to the championship in both leagues, but you still got to go back to him. The 49ers offense just crumbled last week, a tough matchup. I expected the 49ers to roll over the Baltimore Ravens despite the tough matchup, and I was wrong. The turnovers got in the way, but against Washington, you have to go back to these guys, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk at wide receiver. Aiyuk is just going to shred this defense, I think. He's more of their traditional, downfield wide receiver. Even in games where he doesn't see a ton of targets, he often hits on big plays, gets in the end zone. And I think this is a week where we see that happen, where you're going to be happy with him. Probably starting him as a high wide receiver 2, low wide receiver 1. And then same with Deebo. To me, Deebo's a must start. It's so unfortunate. He only caught 4 of 12 targets last week. Man, that's so frustrating to look at when I lost by like 2 or 3 points. If he just would have caught like 2 more passes, man. But he's also used on the ground. So I think McCaffrey is going to eat in this game. Every single offensive weapon might not put up a week-winning performance just because there's only so much to go around. But especially coming off a loss, we might see San Francisco really try to send a message like, we're still the favorites in the NFC. This is a get-right game. We're going to, hammer Washington. And these are all guys that you got to put in your lineup and start and just hope that they do what they do most weeks and put up a ton of points. All right, my last wide receiver start of the week is someone you're probably starting already, but I just wanted to talk about him a little bit. That's Mike Evans, wide receiver of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Listen, he's been one of the greatest draft picks in all of fantasy this year. In that league where I barely lost, one of the reasons I made it to that playoff game to have a chance to make to the championship is because of Mike Evans. I like my chances to win my third place game. Also, because of Mike Evans, I do have Keenan Allen in that league, and him missing, pretty much the end of the year here has really sucked for me. Another one of the better draft picks on the season. But I just wanted to talk about Mike Evans because he's been so good for fantasy this year. One of the greatest picks and just one of the greatest wide receivers on the season in general. With Baker Mayfield, they just have a thing, man. Last couple of weeks, he's been great. And I just wanted to talk about him because against New Orleans, he has a rough history against that team, especially with Marshawn Lattimore. He always gives Mike Evans fits, doesn't give up a ton of production to him, often shuts him down completely. Last I heard, Marshawn Lattimore should not be playing in this game. I saw some things saying he was out, some that he's doubtful. So just monitor the situation with that. If Lattimore is out, Mike Evans is an auto start. I would probably be starting him regardless, just because of how good he's been. But expectations would be limited with Lattimore lined up across from him. But with no Lattimore, ooh, baby. Mike Evans is going to have his big game against New Orleans finally. Just ton of targets, red zone threat every week. He has 13 touchdowns on the year. You got to play him. He won people championships last year, if you guys remember, a 3-touchdown game in the championship after having a pretty dreadful season overall. Yeah, he had 2 wide receiver overall, the wide receiver 1 on the week. He did that twice last season and wasn't a wide receiver 1 any other week than that, but one of those came in championship week. So obviously that's just kind of a random, silly fact, but he has big game potential here. So he's a wide receiver 1. He's an auto start. Fire him up, and hopefully he can win you guys a Super Bowl just like he did with Tom Brady back in the day. All right, we're gonna move on to tight end, and I can't believe I'm doing this. And please leave me a nasty comment if this is kind of a stupid thing for me to do. But I'm gonna make Travis Kelce a start of the week. I don't think he's necessarily someone where it's too obvious to talk about him. He's not putting up the type of production he has over his career, which is saying something because he's still great for fantasy in general. He's the number 1 ranked tight end on Fantasy Pros, which is a consensus rankings. So, obviously still someone you're probably starting, but you might be tempted to like pivot to someone else. And I would stick with him for one more week. Obviously it's the last week of the year, unless you're playing week 18, which in that case, just unsubscribe because I'm kidding. Like I'm happy for you guys. You want another week of football, but your championship should be this week. Okay. But I think this is a spot where we can see the Cincinnati Bengals get right a little bit. Or the Cincinnati Bengals, the Kansas City Chiefs get right against the Cincinnati Bengals. It's a great matchup for tight ends, and I think we see a little bit of a Kelce resurgence. It hasn't been the Kelce of old, but he has still had so many good games this year, especially at that tight end position that can be so hard to nail down. Tons of double-digit performances. He's had a couple number 1 performances on the week, number 2 and number 3. The last couple weeks have been rough for Kelce. Still saw 7 targets each of those games. So I'm just calling for a bounce back here. Someone where I'm telling you guys not to panic too much. Stick with Kelce for 1 more week, and I think you're going to be happy that you did. Next up, maybe someone you're already auto starting as well, but George Kittle, I'm going to make him a start of the week as well. I feel like it's warranted just because he has those highs and lows. But even coming off a bad game overall as an offense, Kittle was still the tight end 1 on the week in half PPR with 16.1 points last week. He does have those highs and lows, though. I traded him away in Dynasty last season. I traded him in a first for Kyle Pitts, which has definitely not helped me, especially as someone who was, still a competitive team, made the playoffs, but I expected Pitts to kind of be better and Kittle to kind of trail off as he's in his 30s now and was kind of on a downward trajectory, but he's really been kind of having a bit of a resurgence this year. We still have those ups and downs, but it seems like there's a lot more ups lately. So I just wanted to kind of give him a shout out here where he's one of those rare tight ends in the league that can do a lot after the catch, and he can win you a week by himself. So he's probably someone that I would say you should start no matter what, unless for some reason you have like a Kelce and a Kittle somehow. Then maybe you should be like honestly flexing one of them and starting the other at tight end, because I think they're both really good in general, and they have the opportunity to win you a week just based on their matchups. Kittle's taken on Washington, coming off of a brutal loss. Like I said, not all the 49ers offensive weapons can, score 2 touchdowns, but I do think they can all be good for fantasy, and Kittle is just as likely as anyone on that team to put up a big game. Maybe not as much as CMC, but we've seen Kittle put up monster performances this year and throughout his career. And at that tight end position, it's so rare that you can actually make a difference. Like, you can play a Gerald Everett, who I think is a good play this week. We'll talk about him in a bit, but he's probably not going to put up 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kittle is someone who can do that. So you got to play him. He could win you a week. If he doesn't have his big blow-up game, you live with it. And you got to fire him up as a must start. All right, we're going to move on to Trey McBride. I almost said wide receiver. He is a tight end technically for the Arizona Cardinals, but he's pretty much their number 1 wide receiver. I thought about making Kyler Murray, their QB, a start of the week, but he's been a little shaky. So I just kind of wanted to focus the attacking the Philadelphia Eagles passing attack with talking about Trey McBride, who really didn't have an opportunity to show what he was made of until recently, just with Zach Ertz being there and being involved. McBride was a highly drafted tight end. He was supposed to be great for fantasy, just never saw the field. Now that Ertz is out of the equation, McBride has been phenomenal for fantasy. He's in the must-start category, especially this week against the Philadelphia Eagles. I see no reason to turn away from him unless you picked him up and you already had like a Kittle or a Kelce, but you can make a case like McBride has just as much upside as those guys do. He is a top-tier tight end 1. I'm not going away from him. Coming off of a not great game, 6 for 31, only 6.1 points in half PPR, but 8 targets. Like at tight end, that's very, you'll take that each and every week. He is their passing game. He is their number 1 wide receiver, and it's a matchup that can be exploited. The Eagles defense they have holes right now. So hopefully Kyler is good to go and he can get the ball to Trey McBride and he looks good. But regardless, I'm firing him up as a top tight end 1 play this week against Philly. Okay, now we're going to kind of get into a little bit more of a murkier tight end situation. So I feel like I just talked about 3 auto starts at tight end. So now we're going to go to some kind of lower tier players. We're going to go with Gerald Everett, tight end of the LA Chargers, okay? Not a must start, but a great streamer this week. He's seen 4, 5, 8, 8, and 8 targets the last few weeks. 12.3, 6.4, 6.4, 6.6, and 7.7 points in half PPR. Again, not, electric fantasy production, obviously, but in my case, I was relying on Taysom Hill and Cole Kmet. I'm not putting Taysom Hill back out there with those snap counts recently being like 10 a game the last couple of weeks coming off the injury. And Cole Kmet is dealing with his own injury. So if Kmet is good to go and is like, healthy, I would probably lean Kmet. but I would really want to play Gerald Everett. I have him in that league as well as another league where I'm deciding between him and Waller, as I'm also pivoting away from Taysom Hill in that league. So Everett is someone who, like, against the Denver Broncos, I forgot to even mention, which is arguably the best matchup for tight ends in all of fantasy. I think he's a very safe play. If he sees 8 targets again, he's going to, have 5+ receptions, get to that 40-ish yard mark, a decent bet for a touchdown. And another thing to talk about here is just the Chargers need him. No Keenan Allen, no Palmer. Mike Williams has already been gone this, since he tore his ACL early in the year. Looks like it was week 3 against my Vikings, I remember. And I do think, Eckler will be involved as well, but he hasn't looked the same. He hasn't been as efficient. He'll get targets, but I think Everett is going to be needed in this game, and this is the position where Denver gives it up to a lot. So Gerald Everett is someone that I'm starting as a low tight end 1, high tight end 2 with a really safe floor. And I know he hasn't shown a ceiling really lately, but it just takes a touchdown at tight end, and all of a sudden you're a weak winner. So I would highly consider him, especially in half PPR. What I'm probably going to do if Cole Kmet is ready to go is I'll probably start Kmet in that league, which is non-PPR, and start Everett in the league that is half PPR, which is my other league. So someone that I am looking to get into my lineup if I can. And if I don't have like a number 1 top tier option like a McBride or something like that. All right, my last tight end start of the week is Darren Waller, tight end of the New York Giants. And this is a risky play. This is someone that you can play if you really just don't have another option. So I just talked about Everett, how I will probably be starting Everett in that half PPR league over, Taysom Hill and over Waller. Waller, to me, he has a little bit more upside just because we've seen it over the course of his career. He has big game ability where he can put up big yardage, get in the end zone, but it just hasn't really happened this year. Just with injury and quarterback play, it just hasn't really materialized. But the last couple of weeks, since returning from injury, he's seen 6 and 5 targets. I played him last week in that matchup where I lost by like 3 points, and he was so close to this long, like, play action, like 3rd and short, 4th and short, play action pass. Tyrod was kind of falling back, threw it up to him, and it landed just short where he could have caught it and ran with it so far, and I would have won. But I just want to put him on your radar where it wouldn't surprise me if he has a big game here. Tyrod Taylor is the starter. I think that gives you a little bit more consistency than with Tommy DeVito. Tyrod Taylor is not an elite quarterback by any means, but hopefully he can get Waller the ball. He should see 5+ targets, and the Rams are a good matchup for tight ends. So I'm playing him as a kind of in the same range as Everett, low tight end 1, high tight end 2. I was really a fan of Waller in draft season, and it just hasn't materialized. But I think you can turn to him in a pinch if you need a streaming option this week in your championship game. And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Good luck in your championships and your 3rd place games and your consolation brackets. Even if you're out of the playoffs, good job on you monitoring what's going on with the NFL, watching videos like this so that you can stay tuned for what's going to happen next year, because so much happens at the end of the regular season. But people who miss the playoffs, they check out, and then, come draft season, there's names that they haven't really heard of, or, they're not in the loop. So good on you guys for, sticking with it, even if you're not in the playoffs, making it through the season, watching videos like mine. And make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more fantasy football content. Good luck to all my championship teams out there. Hopefully we will all win at least one trophy this season that we can be proud of and brag to our friends. But thank you guys. Have a good one. See you guys next year. Okay. Bye. Peace out.